Hello, everyone. My name is Joy Kanwar, and I am an associate professor of legal writing at Brooklyn Law School. I'm thrilled to be part of this year's Legal Writing Institute's virtual conference. Many of you know that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our lives and our work mightily this year, and I thank the conference organizers for allowing me to be part of their fantastic and timely programming. Today, I will talk to you about teaching our law students in a post-truth world, and I will share some insights as we move towards the fall semester, a semester that will prove to be historic on a number of levels. So let's start with a few terms. What exactly is post-truth, and what does it mean? In 2016, Oxford Dictionary selected the word as its International Word of the Year. Post-truth is defined as circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. As you may know, or Word of the Year, which is typically chosen by a dictionary or a media organization, is crowned at the end of the year for which it was chosen, and 2016 proved to be a significant year for this concept, both in America and worldwide. This led me to ask myself whether any other related terms were chosen as words of the year in recent memory. Yes, Dictionary.com chose misinformation in 2018. Misinformation is false information spread regardless of whether there is an intent to mislead. Contrast that with disinformation, coming from the Russian word dezinformatsiya, and which NPR's resident word maven chose in 2019. Disinformation means the dissemination of deliberately false information. And what about fake news? Fake news is not new at all. In fact, Benjamin Franklin both used this term and was quite a purveyor of it. He famously wrote as alter egos, such as Silence Dogood, or created full-scale advertisements within reputable papers for tracts of lands for sale. All fake, of course, but it created the appearance of verity. I would like to share one particular Benjamin Franklin story today, though, because it stands in for a number of concepts that are useful here. In the spring of 1782, Franklin wrote an entirely fake supplemental issue to a very real Boston paper, known as the Independent Chronicle. In the issue, he published a letter from Captain Garish of the New England Militia, claiming that he had intercepted a grisly gift intended from the Seneca chief to the King of England. The gift consisted of hundreds of scalps of soldiers, farmers, women, and children described in great detail by their markings, and was ostensibly to please the king. Interspersed within the paper were other items like sale notices for local properties, all designed to look real. Franklin's objective was to disrupt the peace negotiations between the colonists and the English crown, and it worked. The story went that era's version of viral and spread from Boston to New York all the way down to Philadelphia. It took a week to cross the Atlantic to England and France, but it even made it there by boat. Because the actual Independent Chronicle had not published it, Franklin devised an ingenious and effective way to get the word out. He had the papers delivered to local influential people, who then passed on the story to others because they believed the paper to be real and the story to be true. This had the effect of validating the information and repeating the story because people were hearing it from more than one verified source. These are two of the techniques by which people form their beliefs. Franklin used a third way in this story as well. Part of the reason that people believe something is true is that we use shortcuts or heuristics to verify information, and studies show that we tend to believe people we think are trustworthy and hold our worldview, and we tend not to change our beliefs once we fix them. Franklin knew this and got the paper to the influential people, who he knew would carry the message best. As we move from childhood to adulthood, information deficits or gaps in knowledge or interest in a subject tend to increase. Much of the concern around these deficits is that they calcify and do not allow for correction. In fact, in Brendan Nyhan and Jason Reifler's work, the one interesting reversal of this is when a surprise validator, that is, someone who you trust in already, validates something that you would otherwise not believe. Think, for example, if Rush Limbaugh suddenly said something in support of climate change scientists. Do you recall these two images? This was the great presidential inauguration crowd size debate that took place in January 2017 after President Trump was elected. So, to refresh your recollection, the image on the top is a photo from President Obama's inaugural crowd in January 2009, and the photo on the bottom is a photo from President Trump's inaugural crowd in January 2017. Take a good look at both of these images. Consider a Washington Post study in which 1,388 American adults were shown photographs of the crowd size from the two separate presidential inaugurations we just saw. Here, two phenomena took place. First, half the group was asked which photo belonged to which inauguration. As the questioners expected, people who politically supported either candidates Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election claimed that the crowd for their party's president was bigger. Of course, the objectively true answer is that the January 2009 Obama inauguration pictured above had more attendees. In this case, the study found that 41% of Trump voters, 8% of Clinton voters, and 21% of people who did not vote in the 2016 election gave the wrong answer. Second, and more tellingly, the other half of the study group was not asked about any particular president, but rather simply which photo has more people. Here, 15% of Trump voters responded that there were more people in the photo from Trump's inauguration than Obama's, whereas 2% of Clinton voters and 3% of non-voters thought the same. The researchers thought that this may track a mental process political psychologists call expressive responding, in which the respondents knowingly give a false response that expresses their worldview. This is consistent with the literature on the role of information deficits in decision-making. When we talk about the modern context of untruth, it is very important that we are precise. While some of these terms are well known and have been applied throughout history, some of these terms are part of the digital revolution, which has hastened the spread of false and unverified information. The next two slides are text-heavy, and apologies for that. But although some of the terms may stack on top of one another, they're distinct. All of these are false, but not all of them are technically bad. For example, propaganda is used to further a cause or discredit it, and often is associated with a state actor. Disinformation can be used to discredit as well or to cause confusion, but there's a defining characteristic to that term that is basically the spreading false information deliberately. Conspiracy theories involve a plot and are typically spread as part of a disinformation campaign. And here are the next three terms. Clickbait is, of course, something coming out of the digital era and is something that we're all familiar with. It's something such as a headline designed to draw readers in and make them want to click on a hyperlink. But when that's clicked, it takes readers to something wholly unrelated or dubious. Satire is a long-standing concept. Think of Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, for example. That is a false story designed to poke fun at society or the government. It sometimes, but not always, identifies itself. Sometimes people will see the story out of context and believe it to be true. The last one here, bias-challenging information, is pretty interesting for our modern times as well. It's the tendency to believe something is not true or is fake news simply because it does not conform with our beliefs. So, the question is, does any of this have relevance in pandemic times? At this point, it's hard to keep track of all of the stories that have swirled around the COVID-19 pandemic this year. From the virus itself being a hoax, to whether 5G cell phone towers spread the disease, to whether homemade potions have the power to ward off or cure the disease. What is true, though, is that false information can have dire public health consequences. In her article, Alternative Facts in the Post-Truth Society, Meeting the Challenge, scholar S.I. Strong called on the community of lawyers, judges, legislators, or anyone interested in deliberative democracy to meet the challenge of addressing the nature of facts in unprecedented times. A group of us answered the call. Professor Tanya Kowalski brought together a symposium for the Washburn Law Journal, and I, along with the great Terry McMurtry Chubb, Ann Mullins, Kara Cunningham Warren, and Catherine Page, met in Kansas to begin the conversation, the result of which came out in a special symposium issue last summer. My suggestions in the rest of the presentation are the thoughts I came up with there and since. With a nod to Aldous Huxley, I ask now, what can we do in the legal academy and within the legal writing community in particular to help our students navigate this brave new post-truth world? Well, with apologies to Jonathan Swift, I have a few modest proposals. 5 ideas to be exact. First, model frameworks. Empathy goes a long way with students, and what you show in class becomes the framework for dialogue. Welcoming everyone in the classroom and setting expectations early for dialogue and norms goes a long way to help students feel seen and heard in the classroom. This in turn leads to a space in which students can examine their own assumptions. Second, be aware of your own bias. This is just as important as the first to lay down the foundation for an open and inclusive classroom. If this summer has shown us anything, it is that there's still work to do to dismantle structural bias, and that this work requires personal examination as well. Third, understand information literacy in a broader way than just academic and writing literacy. As you can see in this image, information literacy crosses the boundaries of academic literacy, new literacy, media literacy, and digital literacy. And incorporating this concept into the classroom is a must right now. For example, consider teaching a module or boot camp for students early in the semester so that they can learn to detect fake or unverified content. Although this does not seem like something that is natural for law school, information literacy teaching has been going on in the K-12 classroom and in college campuses for some time now. But we can't presume with the onslaught of untrue information, particularly on the internet, that our students are coming in knowing how to tell whether something is true or false. Fourth, teach our students the language of disagreement. They should know how to disagree in a civil and civic way, and this quality translates directly into their professional development. Finally, increase opportunities for students to see all sides of the story. This too builds into students' professional development. A few ideas are to flip the script on them in a negotiation or in a moot court exercise, or ask students to think through multiple roles, not just that of their clients. This helps them see the issues and interests in a 360-degree way and understand their own clients' situations much better. And finally, I'm very interested in hearing from you. Do you have any techniques addressing polarization caused by misinformation in the classroom? Or do you have techniques to teach about or combat the various forms of misleading information? Please let me know what you think is useful from your own teaching or your experiences. I'd love to hear from you, and I thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Namaste.